Patroclus on another note sounds pretty boring. Like this is just a sidebar. He sounds pretty boring. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. He just sounds like he's just, you know. But hi, New Year. Are we excited? Are we scared? Thank you for clicking, guys. I'm just show you what I'm reading. The Song of Achilles, Madeline Miller. First of all, I want to say, just for the sake of my ego, that this was not an intentional buy. Like, I mean, there are a lot of people who make it their mission to buy like books that have been embalmed or look really good as this. I went to Barnes & Noble with my brother and I saw this and I just got it because it was blue. And I've seen this book a lot. Haven't read it, didn't know much about it, but I knew it was gay. And that was a selling point. And they caught me. And I'm halfway in. This is my second read of the year because this year I had to change a lot of things in my routine. And no one asks about that, you don't care. Let's talk about the book. Interesting. So the book got me one way. It started with a POV that was like in first person almost. Now the vocabulary is really of its times. So I have so much to say. So the book feels like random segue, but for anyone who's read Game of Thrones or watched Game of Thrones, you should remember the books and the stories were written by, I think, maesters or servants or like healers who heard of the stories and basically wrote letters and wrote retellings of what they heard and the gospel and everything. This book feels like an old letter or like an old book that was found somewhere and the person was writing like a diary that progressed over the years. Now, one thing I will say is I had to keep up with how like time went by in this book. One moment I was reading, it started with the reader. It started with the narrator at 9 years old, and the next thing it's been like a month, and then it's been a year, and then it's been 2 years, and it's been 2 weeks. Time goes by pretty quickly. I don't know if we're leading up to something where there's like a certain events where it's going to then stop and tell the story. But so far, time's been going pretty fast, and it's been building like a relationship. Now, I will say I don't know. As much as like it's telling from one point of view, I don't know much about the narrator. So he's not the narrator who's Patroclus. So I will say I thought we were reading from Achilles' point of view, but we're not. We're seeing Achilles through the point of view of this one person, Patroclus, who now I don't know much about Greek mythology. I don't know much except for like the stuff that like we hear all the time. And I almost forgot how in some Greek stories it was normal for gods to jump down from the heavens and sleep with people without their consent and run away or turn into swans or something. So Achilles, for example, his mom was a sea nymph and she was ideally raped by this king who was told that like that's who his wife would be. And so he saw her on a rock and the book explained like her basically being held down and this guy having his way with her. She got pregnant and her father had told the nymph that like they couldn't do much until they had the child. So she had to live with this king. And the moment she gave birth to Achilles, she went back to the sea. So it's a really, really interesting thing that I have to kind of get used to. Now, I will say, have I gotten bored at some point? Yes, only because now this is the main thing, I like books that are like on smoke or books that have a call to action. I want to know where we're headed. I want to know what's going on. And and this is the good thing, I'm adjusting to the fact that like, I don't know where this book is heading. I haven't read the book. I haven't like watched more about it, but I'm trying to get comfortable with the fact that like maybe there is no call to action. Maybe we're just going to see how this relationship built and matured over the years, and that's going to be okay. That's what I'm learning, and that's going to be fine because this year, one thing I did say I want to do is I want to read a lot of books that are out of my comfort zone. So more science fiction books like this that are, oddly not so driven to one direction. And also non-fiction as well, like memoirs and stuff, which I did last year, but that's beside the point. So, Patroclus, interesting guy. He's a prince in his own right as well. And his dad basically banished him because he committed murder. And like the parents of who he murdered basically said it's either you kill this guy or you banish him from the kingdom. So he got banished. And then it came up later where Patroclus basically said that he'd realized that like his dad banished him not because of who he killed, but because he basically admitted to the murder. Because he was telling Achilles the story, and Achilles was like, why didn't you just lie? Or why didn't you just run away? Or say you found the body, why did you have to admit, to the murder? And that's kind of started to reveal in a way to the kind of person Patroclus is, or Patroclus, either or. Because again, I don't really know much about him. He's basically just like longing, and he almost sounds like a whiny person. I might not be getting any of this right, because again, I haven't gotten to the end of the book, but so far, this is where we're at. And Achilles, on the other hand, is gorgeous. Just the way the book describes him, he's like a mommy's boy. He's also like half god, so his hair is golden, which I basically pictured as like very, very bright blonde. He has an amazing body. He's really fast. He knows how to fight and train. He's the best fighter, allegedly, everywhere. And he's going to be the best warrior, allegedly. No one knows. Now, something interesting that is spinning me, there's like a war. Well, not a war, but like basically there's going to be a war in Troy. And the father called Achilles saying he wants him to lead the army because they've asked for their help and everything. And his mom has had this whole thing of how he's going to be the best warrior, XYZ. But something happens with Patroclus. He wakes up and he says that he doesn't see Achilles. He doesn't see his, he sees his sandals on the floor, but it's a usual thing. So he's looking from around the kingdom, and then he goes to the dad, and the dad is like, his mom took him away. It's like, what do you mean? Which also, Patroclus has also been assigned to Achilles as like a, I don't know what the word is, but it's like an aide or a helper, or what's the word I'm looking for? Like a assistant, or like a brother in arms, something like that, which they're also fucking. But it just kind of helps as well. So anyway, he finds out where Achilles is, and the king gives him a bunch of gold so he could sail to the island, which takes him a month as well. Again, time goes by fast because the way he describes the sail, which of course sails usually take long, but he talks about it and then he just mentions randomly that like it's been a month whilst he was looking for Achilles, like the whole journey, which I have to get adjusted to. But he finds Achilles, but he finds him in a very interesting situation where he goes to this kingdom, he sees the princess of the kingdom, and she's like, okay, you're gonna have dinner and then we'll figure out who you're looking for. And then, they bring out like women to dance basically for the people having dinner, and he sees Achilles being presented as a woman. And Achilles runs to him and gives him a hug. And like the princess is like, what's going on? Someone's taking trash outside. So the princess was wondering, what's going on? Who are you? Leave him alone. Yeah. And he goes, oh, this is my husband. So Achilles is posing as a woman and says, which I think I want to say, this has been the most interesting part of the book, except for something else. Achilles is like, this is my husband, I'm with him. And the girl's like, no. You know what the deal is here. Which, come to find out, the mother of Achilles had already said that Achilles will pose as a woman for the entire kingdom, but they knew the girl, Neo, was a guy who she's already had sex with Achilles and she's pregnant with his baby. So it was a whole thing. His mother was basically trying to hide him from going to war, even though she said he was going to be the best warrior. So that's kind of where I'm at now. But there was also a period of like 3 or 4 years where Achilles, Patroclus, and a satyr or a centaur, like half horse, half human, I forgot what they're called. They were like in the mountains training for a while and just learning how to live and like fish. And that was also a very, very good part because it felt like a very interesting, if it was in a movie, I'm visualizing like, the training sequence in Hercules, where it was like going and see, I visualized that and it was pretty cool to visualize. And that's been the book so far. I'm not bored. I'm just getting comfortable. And I finish as quickly as I would finish a book that I was like, craving for the ending for. I'm curious to see, because again, Achilles is someone who, if it's the same Achilles, I know of like Achilles' heel because he died in battle because of his heel or something. I don't know if it's the same person, but so far so good. That's what we're reading. This is what's going on this month. And curious, very curious indeed. I don't hate it. I'm not craving it, but I don't hate it. And I think that's good for now. But yeah. Hi. There's finally been a call to action in the book, I think. And I was thinking yesterday of how I might just be spoiled because I believe not every book has something that like not every book has like a mission or a certain discovery or like a certain mystery. Not every book has that. So for the first like 200 pages of this book, we were just seeing like a day-to-day, year-to-year, a movement of we're falling down, a movement of we're falling down again, a movement of Achilles and Patroclus from wherever to wherever. So Patroclus and I don't know what's going on. Patroclus and Achilles were at this what do you call it? Like on this island, basically, with the place where where Achilles pretended to be a woman. This is annoying. Where Achilles pretended to be a woman, and they got a guest from Diomedes and someone else, a name that's quite popular in Greek mythology, and they were like, entertaining the guest and everything, and they had the women come out who Achilles was pretending to be a woman because his mother, Thetis, who, when I think of her, I picture, there's this show on Netflix called. It's with this girl that has, it's an animation, this girl that walks with like a dwarf and a demon. I forget the name. I'm going to put a picture and see if I can find it. But I picture the mother, she's like a sea, whatever, and she's just always appearing and disappearing at random times. Anyway, they were entertaining the guests and something happened where they were giving like, the guests brought, like they brought like gifts and gold and everything for the king. And the ladies, who were dancing for the guest were like looking at the gold and were touching it and were marveling and everything. Patroclus was really busy looking at Achilles. Now something happened where they spotted Achilles. And everyone like paused because some people didn't even know Achilles was pretending to be a woman, which surprisingly enough is like punishable by death or mockery in some parts of this, this world basically. And some people were like, oh fuck, the secret's gonna be out. And the king was a bit worried because the whole plan was his mother, Achilles' mother, brought Achilles there to run away from said war that these people have now come to recruit for again. Patroclus met with Diomedes, and he could tell that he knew him because in the beginning of the book, we met Patroclus when he was like 9, and his father wanted him to be betrothed to someone called Helen, who was like very beautiful. Which, Helen of Troy. Fuck. I knew it. I just fucking knew it. Helen of Troy. She's gorgeous and everything. Helen of Troy. That's what it was. Okay. Let me gain my bearings back. So he met with someone who he could tell from the pink scar he had on his leg that he had seen him when he was younger. And he thought this guy wouldn't recognize him. But when they spotted Achilles, he was like, Achilles would like to speak with you. And Patroclus says, well, we know who you are. And then they start talking about the war. Now, Thetis, Achilles' mother, walks in the room and she's like, no, you can't take him. And they're wondering, what do you know? What have you heard? And then she then tells them, Achilles is not going to make it back from this war. And then Patroclus, his heart drops because he's like, oh fuck, what's going to be the point? What's going to happen? So Achilles also, they basically tell Achilles that like, if he goes for the war, his fame is going to go across the nations or whatever. But if he doesn't, he's going to, basically die without like fulfilling his prophecy, so to speak. And he didn't want that, so he said he was going to go. So Patroclus summoned Thetis, who they don't really have the best rapport because she doesn't really like him. So he summons her, and he's basically saying, what can he do to not die and whatever. And she's saying, I don't think there's much you can do, but just don't fucking embarrass him. But I think it's because they're like sleeping together or something, which surprisingly isn't that big of a deal. Maybe because Achilles is half god, but it's not as big of a deal or something they really have to hide from, thus far in the book anyway. So now they're like on a boat going to Pythia, where Achilles is from, to summon his troops and everything to then go to Troy for the war. I think that's the call to action. I think we're going to find out what's going to happen with the war, if Achilles is going to die and all of that, jigamajoo. We'll see. I'm enjoying it. I was running through it on my desk at work yesterday and I was like, okay, this is getting really exciting. Even before that, I was still enjoying it because the thing about me is, I don't know if this book is solely a romance, but when I read romance, it just means I'm at a point in my life where I wouldn't mind it, but I'm not getting it. So I just go for the second best thing, which is a book. And that's where I am right now. And it's also a gay romance, which is delicious. But that's where we are, and I'm enjoying it. The writing is okay. I will say something about this book is, I've run through it quickly for 2 reasons. It's very fast-paced and easy to read, but also, I'm not going to lie to you guys, there are a lot of names I skimmed through. Like, I see some names, I'm like, ugh. because in my head I'm like, this name is either not important or I'm just going to run back and research who that person is in Greek mythology so I can like connect the dots. Like Helen of Troy. How can I fucking forget Helen of Troy? I don't know who she is, but that's like a famous name. And then I found out there's a glossary at the back of the book, so that'll be interesting. But I have to head to work, and we will see where this book takes us. Mwah. You know, earlier I mentioned how because of some names that I don't really understand, I've been having to like skim over names and basically just like I'm reading a word and I say and I just read over it basically. That's still happening, but I've noticed that like there've been a lot of like phrases that have to do with like war prepping and battle formations and everything, and I do not really understand. So I've caught myself like today. I was reading a chapter and they were talking about like because they've gotten to the shore of Troy. They're like outside the gates, the army and everything. And I was rereading how they were setting up the plan, and I just couldn't get it. So I had to like Google, because they talked about the gates of Troy or something. I had to Google the gates, and I could picture what Patroclus was talking about, and that kind of made a lot more sense to me. Number two, the kind of romance I like is the kind of romance I've tried to replicate in my life throughout the years, right? So when I was in boarding school, I dated someone, and for the life of me, I really wanted to have this dynamic where it's gonna sound bizarre. I was young, okay? I wanted him to be catered to by me. I wanted to like be his everything, but also at the same time not be nothing at all. I wanted him to like just like have me in his pockets. I wanted to like just do everything for him. It was a weird dynamic I don't really understand, and for whatever it's worth, I'm trying to sort out the lighting. I'm sorry, I don't know what we're doing. Okay. It didn't work, and it was a whole different situation. So that's the kind of dynamic I always wanted. Now, the relationship between Patroclus and Achilles, or Patroclus, how do we pronounce that name? We're going to check that out right now, okay? Because Patroclus pronunciation. Let's see how it's pronounced.
Patroclus. Patroclus. Patroclus.
Patroclus and Achilles, their relationship is something. So they've gone to war, and I'm learning a lot because I'm not going to lie, even till now, when you hear of war, aside like when there's like an oppressor and the oppressed, when there's like two people come together to say, okay, we're going to fight this out to the end, especially in these days, like in the Greek days, I've never really understood how that works. But Patroclus is there, and like he talks about how they go for war, or they go to fight, or try to fight, and he comes back, and like Achilles like wakes him up and he talks about his whole day. It's a really, really interesting dynamic. And currently where I'm at right now, they are basically raiding like neighboring villages, trying to get these people to open the gates so they could storm the kingdom or whatever, but that's not really happening. So it's kind of like a weird back and forth, and I am enjoying this book. I remember picking up this book because I did hear from a couple of people say it would get you out of a reading slump. And right now where I'm at, I don't know if I agree solely with that. I will say it knows how to keep you interested, it knows how to keep you on base, but it's what it is. I don't want to drop it also because I'm almost done. I'm not in the mood to drop it, but it's just kind of how it is. I'm enjoying this book. Now I will say some interesting things that really happened. That again, I have to remind myself, this is for the time. This is how it was. So they were preparing for the war, and the king basically was going to bring his daughter, because they were going to, so they had, before they got to war, they had docked on an island and they were going to sail out the next day. But they woke up, Patroclus woke up actually, and then Achilles woke up, and they realized that everything was still. The waters weren't moving, the wind wasn't moving, and they were like, well, we can't really sail without the wind. So they said they had to give an offering to Artemis. Oh my god, I'm having to learn a lot today. Okay, how do we pronounce her name? Artemis.
Artemis.
Artemis. Fuck, Artemis. That basically to give her an offering to kind of get her to give them back the wind so they could sail. And this king brings his daughter, saying he's going to marry her to Achilles. And whilst they're trying to like put them together, they basically sacrifice her, and it gets really gory. So there's this really interesting dynamic where Patroclus is trying to keep Achilles as innocent as he had been before he got into this war, and Achilles is changing before the reader's eye and Patroclus's eye, where he's now seeing how the prophecy might be coming true, the prophecy where he will probably be the greatest warrior of all time. Now, I don't know much about Achilles. I know that the story I had when I was a kid, I don't know how this will affect this one. Again, this is like me as a reader, I know nothing, okay? But doesn't he die? I don't think it's the same way he dies. I'm going to find out. And so I don't know how that's going to happen. A couple videos I did see of people that read this book said I have to buckle up because it gets tragic real quick. So I don't know. We'll see. But one thing I've been worried about is Patroclus is kind of... This is so irrelevant, but like he has nothing going on for him. He's just there at Achilles' beck and call. Like he's not doing anything. And I kind of find that worrisome. So this is just me, but when I visualized him going on this war with them, I thought, okay, maybe he's going to like write like a maester, or he's going to paint, or he's going to sculpture or mold, whatever you do at this times. But this is just me thinking out loud. But it's really interesting. And I will say I do like how the dynamic is kind of cute. Also, I have to remember Achilles is 16 years old. They're kids. So it's kind of interesting. Achilles is 16-year-old, but their relationship is kind of cute. They like make out from time to time. Every time he comes back from war, he like kisses him to wake him up. He kisses Patroclus up to wake him up. It's a really interesting thing. And other than that, I'll be very honest with you. Even though it is my mission this year to read a lot more books out of my comfort zone, even though that is my mission, which I will be doing. I've started. I enjoy the romance. It's so bad. I can't tell you one thing I hate about this book. I don't really hate anything. It's just not gripping me. And I think it's because of what I said earlier in this video, where I have to get used to knowing that like, there's no like, insert I need to wait for. It's just going to be a book that's going to keep on writing the way it's been writing. And I want something fast-paced, and that's not really what I'm getting right now. So I have nothing to hate about this book. It's just a really, really interesting pace for me. And so far, I will say my best moments in this book has been when they were training with Chiron on a mountain, which was just so interesting. Seeing their day-to-day, how they were learning how to live, and then time was also going that fast as well. That was interesting. I'm learning to appreciate when Achilles was dressed up as a woman at that other kingdom. That was kind of cool. And I think this war bits, it's pretty interesting. It's really gory. It's a lot of details that I don't hate, but it's really interesting. And Patroclus, on another note, sounds pretty boring. Like this is just a sidebar. He sounds pretty boring. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. He just sounds like he's just, But I understand this is a telling of a story from his point of view, but it's just, he's boring, but he's also kind of sad because they brought a woman. So basically, when they go for like these raids from whatever villages, they obviously take spoils and they steal and everything. So they brought a woman, and he told Achilles to claim the woman, which is what we're doing at this time. Any warrior can claim. Achilles being like the most powerful, basically, or the most, skilled warrior, claimed her. And obviously, they weren't going to sleep with her. They just wanted to get her away from anyone else who would want to sleep with her. So they freed her, which was really interesting. I like that about him. He's very grounded, and he's trying to get Achilles grounded after each war. So I'm trying to see how long that will last. And I don't want to bore you, but that's kind of where I am right now. And yeah, it's going, and yeah. don't know where to start. I don't know where to start. Now, have I spent maybe half of this vlog talking about how this book hasn't excited me? Absolutely. We'll get back to that in a second. But the last... Also, I have one more chapter to go. I mean, what else could happen at this point? But the last act of this book spun the fuck out of me. And I don't know how to feel about that. I don't know if I should feel upset, betrayed, sad, all of those at once. I don't know how to feel. And quick heads up, I might spoil something because I have to talk about how I feel right now briefly. I mentioned earlier that Patroclus wasn't doing anything at the war. And then shortly after, he became a nurse. Now, one thing I will say that I didn't really like, but I could see how it helped the book, was the war took place for like 7 years. So this is like a 7-year thing. So at the end of the book, Achilles is 27 years old, I believe. So I don't know where to start. I don't know where to end. But I really do want to say, I've seen how people go on and on about how this book is a romance novel. And in its own regard, it is, but it's so much more than that. And I don't want, like, I would really not want that to take away from how amazing this book is. It's eloquent, but it's not just a romance novel. The romance ideally is nice, it's cute, it's whatever, but there's so much to it, and there's tragedy, obviously, as well. Patroclus, they had like a little med tent, let's just say like a medivac, or like a little urgent care for when people were injured during the war, and like they come back after the raid to come back to their camp and everything. And remember, Achilles and Patroclus were trained by Chiron, so you know he was of great use there, and he really helped. You know, it started with him like just being bored when Achilles would go, and he was tired of waiting for Achilles, so he would like, you know, wander, and he found a tent where they would, you know, they were healing people, and he was able to like just start by taking out arrows on people's legs, and from there he made some kind of bond with the person who was doing it before, and they trusted him. And I will say, I hate that it took so long, but towards the ending of the book, I was able to appreciate and enjoy Patroclus more, because I'm not going to lie to you, in probably the last video, I had so many feelings about Patroclus, and I was just thinking he was almost like a bottom feeder. I didn't really have anything good to write about him. I was talking so much shit, basically. And then the book showed me otherwise, the third act, because he was so useful on the camp. He was helping with like sick people, and just people come back from war. It was amazing. There was also like a little bit, so there was a lady, I forget her name right now, but obviously, you know, when they go for raids, they get like prizes and everything. And there was a lady who came back, like the first one actually, and he saw what was going to happen to her, which was going to be taken by someone else, and she was going to be used for whatever. So he told Achilles to claim her, because obviously he's Achilles, and they did, but then they became friends. And so, also, something I didn't realize was, even though obviously the book's in English, they're speaking Greek. It took me a minute to realize that, because like, he was talking to this girl, and he talks about how, because obviously you're reading from his point of view, and he says like he had to teach her to learn Greek so they could communicate better, and then he also learned her language as well. And over the 7 years, obviously, the girl also became like a very interesting character. Not like there was so much going on about her, but it reminded me of someone. So there's a book that I talked about a bit, Tender as a Flesh. There was a particular character that was human, but was used for consumption. The book gives more context, okay? And she was basically given to someone as, this girl was given to someone as a gift to be consumed, but he really didn't have the stomach to do it, so he kept her as like a pet or a friend almost, and he was almost like kind of teaching her how to do things. It took a left turn because he got her pregnant, and it took a left turn. But it was reminding me of this because they were basically keeping this lady and teaching her how to do things, teaching her English or Greek, and she became a good friend to them. Actually, an interesting twist was when she asked Patroclus if he ever wanted to be a dad. She was basically offering, you know, whatever. And he, his gay ass, was like, actually, I'm betrothed to Achilles. So that was kind of fun. But so that was an interesting bit as well, because the war thing was all just going back and forth, and you could tell. Well, in my head, I thought there's only so much that you could say about the war, but what else is going on in between? And that's what they did with, like, Patroclus going to the let's just call it the urgent care, and this girl, and every lady after that was brought after that, she was like their point of contact, and she would help them settle in and whatever, regardless of the weird circumstances. I also remember that this like war is happening from one person's point of view because I watched the trailer of Troy because I got very emotional when I got to like the ending of the book. I haven't much chapter left, and first of all, I had to go to the cast to see if Patroclus was there, and he was. But I wonder if their love is going to be, showed in this, in the movie. That's the trick for another day. I haven't seen Troy. I was surprised to see Brad Pitt and Orlando Bloom. It was very interesting. So many feelings, so many thoughts. I'm going to come back because it's late at night now, and I want to finish this chapter. But wow, wow. I will say, Achilles, you arrogant fuck. So much could have been averted if Achilles wasn't arrogant, but it's Greek mythology. They're all arrogant. They're all fucking arrogant, and they don't know how to keep it together, keep their dick in their pants. They don't know how to calm down, breathe, and make a decision. So I understand it. Sometimes they lead with their chest, not their mind, not their heart, not even their dicks. Sometimes they lead with their chests and their shoulders. And because they believe, I have a big ego, everyone else is going to die, which is what happened. Because if Achilles didn't do what he did, we would have a different story by now. Also, Achilles' mother, I love that she stood her ground to the ending. Because when the ending happened, she came and she's like, you need to get it together, or this isn't worth it. Let's, keep it pushing. I love her. I really love her. Oh my god, this book, it's interesting. It's really interesting. And the third act, the last act, almost makes everything that happened before almost kind of null and void. I don't think that makes any sense, but like there was so much building and so many worlds we got to see the middle of the book, and so much, like, I don't want to say character building, but so much of an expose that the ending just makes everything look like a fever dream, because the ending is just, it's such an ending. I'm gagged. I'm really gagged, and I have to come back with like, a solemn mind so I could give you guys my thoughts and give you guys some pointers, because I put some stuff down in my notes. But wow. Also, the way Achilles and Patroclus talk to each other is very poetic, and I really enjoy that. And it's almost like, because one of the reasons why I was a bit upset about people just hammering on this book being a romance is because they almost seem like a very retired married couple. And what I mean is, we know they're in love, but it's not so much as shoved in your face. It's only when there's like stakes and like, something about to go, awry, that you see how much they love each other. Aside from that, they're like a very retired married couple where it's just, they're in love, and you get the cute moments when they're like in bed, they're lying by each other, or they have a fight and they still make up before bed. Those kind of like little, tidbits. But I don't see how people classify this as a romance. The ending, however, this is a whole other story, I will say. But there's so many things I've highlighted just because of how poetic I believe these guys speak to each other. I mean, Patroclus, that guy, he dies at the ending, and you still experience the rest of the book through his point of view, through what he can see. And for a second, I was thinking I would have preferred to have, if there was like a flip where it was then from Achilles' point of view, that would have been sick. But because he wasn't buried, he was ideally, I'm imagining, this is me using my imagination to fill in the gaps. But because he wasn't buried, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he was still in limbo. So his spirit was like hanging around. That's why he was still able to have a point of view, you know, I guess figuratively speaking, which was pretty interesting. I would have still loved to see Achilles' point of view, but I guess that's not the point of the book. So that was really cool. Also, Patroclus pretending to be Achilles to fight in the war was sick. And I was trying to imagine, because Achilles basically tells him, don't throw the bow because they're gonna know it's not me. Don't try to fight. Just like my presence enough is, you know, going to chase everyone away. And he gets a high, and he's like, he throws one arrow, throws it again, or a spare. He just keeps throwing, and he kills people. And then he kills the second to Hector, who was like the big bad that Achilles was supposed to kill, who I think he eventually did. So I want to imagine that like he killed one person and like the dopamine rush just went through him and he just started like, you know, going ham. Interesting. I am pleased. I am pleased with this book because I wanted to give it a try. This is not something that usually is, this is not my ballpark. I wanted to give it a try and I am pleased. Something interesting happens on the theme of Patroclus, you know, fighting, pretending to be Achilles. He was climbing the wall of Troy, or the gates, or whatever. And if I'm not mistaken, Apollo pulled him down. Like, that's how he got caught, because Apollo like flicked him from the wall and he fell, and then, you know, it revealed his helmet and everything. I thought that was interesting because, if I'm not mistaken, I thought gods didn't intervene with, you know, humans. Unless I'm mixing the mythology, but I could swear I didn't know. I thought gods didn't like, you know, mess around with what humans were doing or whatever. But that was another interesting bit as well. There was also another water god after Patroclus died and Achilles was going ham. There was a water god that stopped him from getting to Hector for a while, and Achilles had a, you know, a whole battle with a water god, which was interesting. Also, by the way, there's a glossary adding in the book that the author puts. So just FYI, if you want to, I always say for books that have a glossary, most times, depending on spoiler scale, it's always good to read the glossary before reading the book so you know who is who. Also, if it's a fantasy, so the fantasy book that I read last year or 2 years ago now, and for the life of me, I have to read the glossary to get back into that universe because I can't remember shit. But yeah, Apollo being involved was really interesting for me. Amazing book. Good book. I know I mentioned earlier that like everyone always talks about how this book is like a heavy romance and everything, which is a tragic romance in its own right, but I do believe this book is also about pride and predestined lives and like having your, because I mean this is a whole different level depending on how far you're willing to think about this, but like I think it's really something when before someone is born there's so much has been said about them. So Achilles, for example, Jesus, if you know much about Christianity, it's really something, and that's what this book is about for me. I feel like that's the main course of this book, and not really a romance story. But that being said, at the ending, when Achilles knows he's going to die, he requests that their ashes be mingled together so they could go to the afterlife together, which I thought was fucking sweet and poetic, like I mentioned before. But then his fucking son, Achilles' son, comes at the ending and fucks shit up. And his son reminds me of Geoffrey so much, and he's only 13 years old. But then Thetis and Patroclus having like a whole resolution to their relationship at the ending was kind of nice. Even though she was still starting on business, she came and she kind of resolved a lot of things with the afterlife for them in a different way, because she couldn't really do much, but in a different way. And sweet book. And I'm gonna stop yapping now. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you enjoyed this vlog, I have a lot more other vlogs, and